looks different today. Okay, let's see. Oh, it's telling me I have to remove it. Save changes. All right. We are live. Okay, good. We are live. And weirdly, no one is here yet, even though we had 45 people sign up for the class. Oh, nope. There they are. It just had to catch up. We do have viewers. So welcome everyone to DabbleU's class on agents and queries with one of my very favorite Southern writers, as I was just telling him, James Wade. So James is, you have four books out, right? Because your fourth one has come out.
Yes, ma'am.
But one of my favorite things that I think I ever heard you say, I was so excited when you were like, I got a 5-book deal, right? I was like, wait, what? Like, that's a thing? You can get that many books in your deal at a time? So I feel like that one like fun fact alone is why everyone needs to listen to you today. So hello everyone here, Sano and Rockin and Aaron and Amy and DA and Hank. Oh, Hank's here. Hank is our podcaster for Dabble, and Robbie, Ginger, B, Alyssa, everybody's here. So gang's all here. James, what I am going to do is I'm going to turn the floor over to you. But before I do that, if you guys have questions for James, put them in the chat, and at the end, right, we'll address questions and do like a Q&A.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to say farewell for now and turn the floor over to you. Take it away.
Thank you. All right. Thank y'all for having me. I'm going to move my notes in front of my face so that I'm not just like watching myself talk. That's so disturbing. Okay. So there's a lot to get to. And we're going to jump right in because I want to have plenty of time at the end to talk with you guys, answer y'all's questions, get kind of more specific and in the weeds. But for this class, we're going to talk about query letters and finding a literary agent. And as Abby alluded to, I have some experience with this. I've taught query letter classes. I have written query letters, obviously, and gone through the whole submission process. I've gotten rejections. I've gotten acceptances. I've gotten everything in between. So I have that kind of experience to talk to you guys about it, but also answer questions and kind of like, work a little on the mental health side of this too, right? Because this is a very scary thing. And so that's kind of where I want to start is when you're looking for an agent, you're writing query letters, the first decision that you have to make, right? And if you guys are like me at all, like decisions that's not my strong suit. I get a little indecisive on like what to watch on Netflix, let alone like, career decisions. But one of the first and biggest decisions we have to make is, when are we ready to query? And there are some kind of, pretty acknowledged rules on that. For one, if you don't have a finished manuscript, like finished meaning beginning, middle, end, everything, then don't query, because it will break an agent's tiny cold heart to fall in love with a query letter and then say, yay, send me the whole manuscript. And you go, oh, well, it'll be done in 6 months. So the first thing is make sure that you're actually finished with your project. But the caveat to that is, what does finished mean? I know a ton of writers, and Abby and I have talked about this before, that just keep tinkering, right? Like they've written the novel, they've got the beginning, the middle, the end, they've got however many acts they want to have, but they just keep tinkering, right? Well, maybe chapter 4 could be, this paragraph could be a little stronger, or maybe if I rearrange a little of the narrative here. It's not to say that those things aren't necessarily valid, but in my experience and in talking over the years with agents, with editors, with publishers, there is nobody in their right mind, nobody that you'd ever want to work with, that would ever look at a manuscript, a query letter, and a manuscript that they love, and go, you know what, it's great writing, it's a great conceit, it's a great idea, but unfortunately, it's only about 95% perfect. So we're going to pass. Nobody will do that, right? Like what they'll say is, we love this, and there's 5% that, we're going to fix once we get a book deal and we get into the, professional editing process, right? Like these things don't have to be as perfect as you might believe in your head, because it's just such a scary concept, like putting your work out there. You want to always put your best foot forward and make the best impression, and all that is true. But there has to be a balance there, because if I'm going to use the word waste. If you waste 4 years, like tinkering, with a manuscript that is pretty wholly finished, then that's 4 years that you could have been writing something else. That's 4 years that you could have been, have already sold that manuscript. It's just 4 years that you won't get back, right? And so if you really want to do this, and if you want to get an agent, and you want to have a literary career, then at some point you have to let go, and you have to go, you know what, it's ready. Let's get it out. Okay. So, now we've got our good, but maybe not perfect manuscript, and it is finished, and we are ready to send it out. Well, where are we going to send it? Okay. So literary agents, right? And they run the gamut, right? From huge agencies with dozens of agents who have dozens of clients, to small boutique firms who, might have just a handful of agents who only have very small client rosters. And it's kind of up to you where you want to submit and what you want to go with. I know a lot of writers who love talking to their agent like every week. They're like, so yeah, when I was looking for an agent, I wanted someone that would be right there with me, and we could talk about everything and all that. And I know other writers, myself included, who would rather not ever hear from their agent unless it's like really, unless there's like a business opportunity or something on the table. And it's just what you're comfortable with, right? But in order to kind of figure these things out, you need to be a little bit familiar with literary agencies, with agents, with publishing houses. And I will send this to Abby to disperse to you guys, but there is a list of places that I think are pretty good. First of all, you want to look at the New York Times bestseller list and see like what kind of fiction is selling and who the writers are. You want to look at Publishers Weekly, Poets and Writers. There's MediaBistro.com. There's Writer's Digest. There's Publishers Lunch, Galleycat, Shelf Awareness. All of these things kind of have a good pulse on where the industry is. And then kind of more do-it-yourself research. You can just look at publishers' websites, right? Or social media accounts. You can do the same thing for literary agencies and agents. My goodness, there are so many agent interviews that are available online. And so you can just read those and try to see like whose vibe fits yours, right? Like who you think would be a good fit to work with. Maybe pick up some books that you feel are similar to what you're writing and flip to the back and see if the author acknowledges, their agent in like the acknowledgments page or whatever. And then you can go to that agency's website, find the agent. Is there a little profile that talks about maybe, what they're wanting, what they're looking for in a manuscript? All of these little things just to help you set yourself up for more success and also just more efficient use of your time, right? Like you don't want to be querying an agent that has nothing to do with what you're writing, right? Like you're writing fantasy, this agent only does children's picture books or something. And so you want to kind of create that list, right? Like whether it's a spreadsheet or Word doc, and just kind of have the agents that you want to query, that you think would be a good fit for you. Now, I'm assuming that a lot of you, just by virtue of being involved with Dabble, y'all are probably out there a little bit, right? Like in the literary world, like you probably already know a lot of this stuff. Maybe you go to conferences or workshops and have heard an agent talk somewhere or whatever. These are all good ways to like kind of connect with that agent. And we'll talk about that in just a minute when we talk about query letters. But so keep those things in mind too, right? Like if you've watched an interview with an agent, kind of just file that away. Like, yeah, I remember seeing this agent talk at this conference, or I watched a YouTube video with this agent or whatever, because all that's going to be a good way to make that connection. So let's get to the meat of this, the query letter itself, right? we've got our manuscript, we've got our list of agents, and now we're ready for kind of the piece de resistance, which is the query letter itself. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be confusing. I think the best way to break it down is a good and concise query letter needs to be about 1 page. I know that's tough for writers sometimes because you just wrote 80,000 words on a manuscript and now you're being asked to condense it into this very small format. But, if you bleed over a little bit from 1 page, that's not the end of the world, but it needs to be pretty concise. And then it needs to be what I call the 4 C's: connection, context, compel, credentials. Okay. So we'll start with fiction because that's what I write. So that's what I have experience in. But for those of you writing nonfiction or memoir, we'll cover that as well. But for fiction, the way you want to set up your query letter is you want to have your connection first. That's going to be the first paragraph. And the number one way you can connect with an agent is you talk about, I read an interview with you, I saw you at this conference, whatever. If you don't have that personal connection, that's okay. The next best way is to say, I love this author or this book and you represent the author, or I love this author and they've been with you for X amount of books. And so, basically you just want to establish right off the bat, hey, I know who you are, right? Like I did my research. I took this seriously. I'm not just randomly querying agents. And so, however, you want to do that is up to you. You can reference that interview. If you've been referred to this agent by someone, then bam, there's your connection. So-and-so told me about you, or maybe, you have a friend that's a client, any of that stuff, right? Just any kind of connection, even if it's just, I looked at your client list, I see that you represent this person, I feel like my writing is similar to this, or, whatever. The next thing you're going to do is establish context. Context being, okay, you've showed the agent that you've done your research, you're taking this seriously, I know who you are as an agent. So now you're trying to tell the agent who you are as a writer. So you're going to establish context by referencing a genre, a writing style, a voice, or something that's specific to you, right? And another great way to do this is to just do a comp, right? Like compare your project to something that this agent would be familiar with. Bonus points if it's actually a book that this agent, represents. And maybe you mentioned that in your connect paragraph. But say like why, right? You represent Kristen Hanna, and I feel like my historical fiction writing is similar to hers based on, whatever, based on our time periods that we write in, based on our strong female characters, based on the style of prose in which we write, whatever it is, you want to, show this agent like A, connect, I know who you are, B, context, and this is why you should know who I am. This is why I'm reaching out to you. And, I would advise just, like tips in this section, I would advise, like, don't say like, I've written the next Harry Potter or something, right? Like you don't want to oversell here. Not that you can't compare your writing to, Harry Potter if you want, but like, just don't oversell. You're going to want to let the agent make the determinations like that. Right. And then the next and most important paragraph is compel. This is the hardest part. Again, like I said, you guys have been working for months, for years, for however long. You've written tens of thousands of words. And now you get a paragraph, maybe 2, but no more than that. To basically summarize your entire project. There are tips and tricks here as well, right? So you're going to want to touch on the key elements of your story, and you want to do this without it turning into, and then. So you want to summarize it, but you want to leave that agent wanting a little more, right? Because you're going to want the agent to ask for a full manuscript. That's kind of the first goal of a query letter. So in this section, you can kind of practice doing this by writing a synopsis of your book. And you can, let's say you could start with, all right, I'm going to try to summarize my book in a page. Okay, so you take each act or major plot point, you summarize that in a paragraph, right? Each summary no more than a paragraph. And then you take that page full of paragraphs and you break each paragraph down even further into like one sharp sentence for each act or for each plot point, and then try to link those sentences together. And usually you've got a pretty decent compel section by the time you've done that. This is going to mimic a little bit like the jacket copy, and so of a book, you open the book and you read the inside flap or you read the back, and that's what is trying to sell the book. This is no different, right? And a lot of times agents will take this compel paragraph that you've given them, and if they agree to work with you, they'll take it and they'll use that to try to then sell the book to publishers. A good thing to do would be just look at some books you like and read the jacket copy and say, okay, now I've read this book. I know everything that happens in it. What key points did they use to get, readers to want to read it? And what's interesting about this is a lot of times when you do that, you find that, especially since you've already read the book, you find that on jacket copies, sometimes there's they can be a little misleading, right? They don't lie or anything, but you can mislead a little bit by maybe highlighting something that's more minor in the book, but that sounds good or compelling and just wants to get readers to read more. In other words, the jacket copy sometimes is framed more from a marketing perspective than it is from a literary perspective, and that's okay. Again, as long as you're not actually lying. But yeah, I would encourage you to look at other books for examples. How does that jacket copy compel you to read more? How does it make you feel emotion for the character or the story, even though you've never read the book before, right? Because that's what you're trying to do. The agent's never read your book, but you're trying to compel them to get a sense or a tone of the story. So once you've done that, and practice it, write it over and over, write different versions of it. You may find that something you wrote on your first try, maybe you want to keep a sentence or two from the first draft, and then the second draft, another sentence or two, and the third draft, another sentence or two, and you Frankenstein them all together, and then that's your perfect compel. And again, a paragraph or two, no more than that. It's at that point, it can't help but start to kind of feel and then, and you just don't want to do that. You want these things to be crisp and the agent to just be moving through it. And then your last paragraph is going to be your credentials. And it's okay if you don't have a laundry list of, bona fides or whatever, but it's better to not. It's better to have a very short credentials section as opposed to having, again, kind of the oversell or the lie or the mislead or what I see the most often when I'm helping folks with their query letters is just things that aren't really relevant. If you're in an MFA, if you have an MFA degree or publishing history, maybe short stories, if you've won any type of award as it pertains to writing, list that. But, if you won an award at your finance job, that's probably not relevant, to a fiction query. So you just put that, one thing that you can put is that, you've taken classes on Dabble or whatever, again, you just basically, these agents get so many queries from folks who are not serious about this, that anything you can do to separate yourself into the, I take this seriously pile is just another small percentage bump that you're going to be successful. Now, if you're a nonfiction writer, the credential section is going to go first. So everything's the same that we just talked about, but the credentials will move up before the paragraph that kind of creates that connection with the agent. And that's going to, it's going to be depending on what your book's about. Let's say you've written a book about parenting. So the agent's going to want to know, okay, why are you qualified to write a book about parenting, right? If you're the parent of 15 kids, then lead with that. Do you have a doctorate in parenting? Lead with that, right? I don't think that's a thing, but I'm sure many parents would disagree. But yeah, if you're maybe you're a blogger and you have a mommy daddy blog or something, yeah, okay, cool. If you got thousands of subscribers, lead with that. Anything that would make the agent more likely or more interested to see what you have to say about your topic. And for memoir, it's sort of the same thing. You're writing about yourself. Obviously, you're the authority, but why is your memoir appealing? And that doesn't just mean, do you have a crazy story, right? But like, yeah, like if you were kidnapped by rebel forces in the Amazon rainforest, then yes, your memoir is going to be appealing. But most memoirs aren't like that, right? So it can also be as simple as, I've lived a halfway normal life, whatever that means. But my memoir focuses on comedic stories from my time as a delivery driver for a beauty supply product company. The crazy characters I met, funny stories they did, which that's true. I did actually do that, but I haven't written a memoir about it. But yeah, you just want to show like why you're the authority, and then why your memoir is appealing, like, right? Like why this, because a memoir is not a autobiography, right? It's like it has a certain genesis and a certain like theme or thematic basis, right? Like this is what I'm focusing on, and this is why. Okay, so what material should you have ready to go? All right, you're gonna, of course, have your manuscript ready to go. Then it's all going to be up to the agent submission guidelines. And if you wonder why I include this in a query writing class, it's because so many people automatically eliminate themselves by just not following instructions. And that's so frustrating because, again, you've worked so hard on this. Like the last thing we want is for you to, not follow the submission guideline, and therefore your submission is never seen, or it's immediately, tossed out. Okay. So there's going to be email submissions. There's going to be submission forms embedded within a website. There's going to be folks that ask you to submit Word docs. There's going to be folks that ask you to copy and paste sections. They're going to want just a query letter and maybe a one-page synopsis of the novel, which if you've already written that, compel guideline, then you'll already have something similar to that. There's going to be folks who want the first chapter, or the first 1,500 words, or the first 10 pages. Like, it's, for whatever reason, I think they all get together and they find ways to just be slightly different from one another, so that it just becomes the biggest headache it could possibly be for us. But pay attention and read the instructions carefully. Know what the agent is asking for. Because again, like there are a lot of people that will automatically eliminate themselves. We don't want that to be us. Once you do all that, send your query. Now, I would advise, before sending your query, that you share it with each other, right? Like do some practice runs, like write a query letter, send it to somebody else, send it to Abby, send it to somebody else at Dabble, and have them, kind of critique it a little bit. Like what did they find the most compelling? Was there a moment where they got a little lost? Was there a moment where they, had kind of bumped up against something, whatever. And just try to get it as good as you can. But just like your manuscript, right? You could overdo it, right? Like you could get too far in your own head, speaking from experience, speaking from just kind of, I think we all as writers have a certain little something in our brain. And yeah, we could obsess over it. And again, like that's not going to be the difference between you getting a rejection or an acceptance. But make it the best you can, and then shot of liquid courage or whatever you need to do. And then just send that thing out, right? Like you have to let go at some point. Now, to me, after everything we've just done, right, it's laborious. It can be painstaking. Sometimes the submission guidelines can be eye-rolling, whatever. But after you've done all this, the hardest part is actually, for me anyway, after you've hit send. You've hit send, it's out there, and now you have zero control over it. That is when I would suggest start writing your next project. Go do something else, right? In part, it's to help you take your mind off of the magnitude of what's happening that you have no control over. But also, when rejections roll in, which they will, it's subjective, right? So that means that even if you send 10 queries, I've never heard of somebody sending 10 queries and getting 10 acceptances, right? So at some point, you're going to get rejections. And when you do, it's always nice to already be working on another project. because then it's like it softens the blow a little bit, in my opinion. But when we're getting rejections, and I'm going to say that like it's a fact because we're all going to get rejections. When we're getting rejections, it's so important to not let that dampen your enthusiasm, A, for your project, or B, just for like your writing overall or in general. Something that I've said in almost every writing class I've ever taught, like regardless of its craft, query, business side of things. Think of your favorite book in the entire world, right? In your opinion, the best book that's ever been written, and go to Amazon or Goodreads or your book review website of choice. And especially if it's a popular book, look at the hundreds, if not thousands of one-star reviews, right? There are people that absolutely think that your favorite book, that like the book that in your opinion, like it doesn't get any better than this book, is the worst book ever. And that should not be scary to writers. That should be liberating, right? That should be a very freeing thing for us, because it just goes to show how subjective our craft is, how subjective our art form is. And so, when you get a rejection from an agent, does not mean this book is not good. It just means the fit wasn't right for whatever reason. And sometimes it has nothing to do even with the fit of the agent and the manuscript. It could literally just mean that agent is looking for a specific thing that is not in your manuscript, and they have yet to put it on their website that's what they're looking for. And so when you did your research, it didn't sync up, right? And yeah, you never know. It's luck, it's timing, it's all of these things that we can't control. So what we want to do is just make what we can control as good as we can, and then just let it go, right? Just meditate, pray, whatever you need to do, but just let it go. Now, hopefully, right, whether you're querying 10 agents or 100, hopefully at some point you're going to get an acceptance. Maybe if you're lucky, you're going to get multiple acceptances. So then it becomes, what are you looking for in an agent, right? And you kind of want to refer back to whatever you had in mind when you started your kind of query process and agent finding adventure, and say, okay, what am I looking for in an agent? Do I want maybe a young, up and coming, hungry agent that really wants to make a name for themselves, and so they're going to be willing to pay me all this attention and work really hard for me? Or maybe I want a older, established agent who has a lot of connections, a lot of resources. It's good and bad on all of these, right? There's no right or wrong answer. With an agent that has a big client roster, they're going to have less time for you, but they might have more resources and connections to get your book sold. With an agent with a smaller roster, or that hasn't been in the business that long, they may not have all those connections, but they're going to fight really hard for you. And they're going to be, hungry to go out and make you a success, because they want to be a success as well. There are some normal things that you guys probably all know, but certainly if an agent says you have to pay them anything or something, that's a red flag. There's no legitimate agent that you have to pay. Agents get paid when you get paid. So run away from that. If an agent says hey, we liked it, but I don't know, can we edit it? Can we make some changes? Can we do this stuff? That's where it gets a little tricky, because I've heard horror stories about writers kind of, working for months to edit their manuscript to try to please an agent, and then the agent not signing them in the end. And now they've kind of, in a way, wasted that time. Maybe they've told other agents no, or maybe they've stopped querying. So, you may want to ask for some kind of assurances, right? Hey, can we, I'm going to sign with you and then I'll edit the manuscript, or something like that. And that's only, there's also nothing wrong with saying no. I'm not going to work with my agent as an editor. Some writers don't mind doing that. Some writers enjoy it. Other writers are no, you're going to be my agent. You're going to do the business side of things. We're going to leave the editing to the editors at the publishing house, right? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just what you're comfortable with. But just be aware that some agents will ask that, and you'll have to kind of make that decision and move forth. Certainly a lot of writers I know, and I was the same way. What kind of agent do you want? Well, I want one that wants me, and I want one that's going to give me a book deal, and that's it. And that's fine. I understand like that. Yes, that is accurate, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it is also important to know that like you're interviewing these agents as well, right? And so you want to talk a little bit about like, what is their communication style, right? Do they prefer phone, email, text, carrier pigeon? Make sure that it's something you're comfortable with. Make sure that your career goals are oriented with theirs, right? Like, if you want a career in literature, but they just are like, well, I just want to work with you for this one book. And then there's another agent who's like, no, I want to work with you, for decades to come or whatever, then take that into consideration. And the reverse is true too. There are some agents who are like trying to plan your career out for you. And maybe you're like, no, I just wanted to write this memoir. Right. And and now that I've done it, I don't think I'm going to do anything else, but I would love for you to sell it. But so just be upfront and honest about what your expectations are as a writer for your career, and make sure that, that jives and everything. And then I would say that the last thing is, we've done all this. You've now picked your dream agent who has said yes to your query. You've signed. Your agent says the manuscript is good to go. So, okay, again, a lot is going to be out of your hands at this point. But hopefully what happens is your agent will then submit your manuscript to publishing houses, and something that's called an acquisitions editor at these publishing houses will then read your manuscript or read essentially your agent's query letter, which a lot of times it brings me comfort to know that agents have to also query and submit to publishing houses, and agents too get rejections, and so you're a team at this point, right? And so your agent's trying to get you a book deal, but it also hurts them when they get rejections. And so that kind of humanizes them a little bit, because sometimes, I don't know. But anyway, once your agent finds you a publishing house, they will basically submit an offer in terms of advance money, royalty percentages, rights to your work, and all those things. And so that's when, you may, depending on what services your agent and agency offers, you may want to think about having a lawyer look it over. It's an important thing, right? And so each step of this process is kind of important, and talk to other writers at every step of this process too, right? Like I said, bounce your query letters off of each other, but also like talk about experiences with this agent or that agent, right? If someone was rude to you or rude to your friend, they're probably going to be rude to you, right? Like we don't want to waste our time is so valuable, and we don't want to waste it, and we want to set ourselves up for success, but also just for efficient failure, if that's the case too, right? Like if we get a rejection, we want to know that we did everything that we could do, and that it was out of our hands, not that we were querying an agent who was going to ask us to, pay them money to take us on as a client or something like that. So do that. Reach out. You're already in a great environment here with DabbleU to talk to one another and to talk to folks about their experiences. Certainly, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about anything we don't get to here in our Q&A via email or whatever. It never bothers me. I've leaned on so many people in this industry on their experience and expertise and knowledge and guidance and all that stuff, that it would be absolutely just it would be nefarious for me to not then share that stuff as well, and be there as a sounding board or a venting partner or whatever it is you need, because this is like, it's tough stuff. Y'all know this, but like writing is hard. It's you're locked away for 99% of the time in your own mind and behind your desk or wherever you write. And then you create this thing that is such a part of you, and then now you have to send that part of you out into the world to be rejected. And again, like that's even if you get an agent, even if you get a publishing deal, even if your book comes out to rave reviews and it's a New York Times bestseller, somebody is not going to like it, right? Like when you put that first word on the page, you are agreeing to at least some level of rejection. And that can be a trippy thing to think about, and especially for those who aren't like used to it, right? Like, at this point I've had thousands of reviews, both good and bad. And so like, you develop thick skin really quickly, but it was not so long ago, right, that I remember like that first like rejection and like just how devastating that can feel. And so, we've got to lean on each other and provide that support, because it's not the end of the world. It's not even the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's a good quote. I'm gonna write that down. But yeah, so let's talk. We've got some time left. I ran through this pretty quickly, I know, but that was just so we could have more time with you guys to answer your questions and to get more specific. But yeah, let's talk about whatever you guys have questions about, and it can be query related or otherwise, right? Like I'm here to help as a writer and a friend. So let's do it.
All right. So here's our first one from Amy. How do agents take you seriously if you have no credentials?
That's an awesome question. Thank you for asking. So basically we've kind of laid out some ways that you can already establish your seriousness, right? Which is, if in that first paragraph you say, I'm reaching out because you represent this writer who I love or whatever, that in itself is like a big green flag for an agent, right? That means that, you have at least put in the time to do research, because I know this probably sounds crazy to you all because y'all are a lot more organized than this, but there are people who will just Google like literary agents and then just start sending their stuff to whatever names pop up, right? And I would say from the agents I've talked to, they say like 50% of the submissions they get have nothing to do with what they actually want or represent. I don't mean like, oh, I just wasn't feeling this manuscript. No, like it'll be like, hi, so-and-so agent who represents literary fiction. I've written a middle grade dystopian novel, and you know what I mean? And so just that very first, like, I know who you are, and then the next, and this is why I'm sending this out to you. Now that being said, like, there's no way around the fact that like someone with a lot of bona fides and credentials is going to appeal more to an agent than someone that doesn't really have that. There are ways to get those, right? You can try to get short stories published, before submitting your novel and all that stuff. But I would say that really the most efficient way to go about it is just really focus in on, so you've created the first two paragraphs that show that you're serious. Really focus in on your compel paragraph or two paragraphs, because if you grab that agent's attention and you have this like really good novel and you've summarized it in this really compelling way, the agent really is not going to care. That's part of the reason that those credentials come last for fiction, is the agent is going to care a lot more about credentials if it's nonfiction, right? Because you can't publish a nonfiction like, hey, I'm the expert on this subject, so that's why I'm writing this book, unless you are some sort of expert on that subject, right? It's completely different for fiction. For fiction, the credentials come last because they matter the least. If that agent is captivated by what you've written beforehand, they're not going to get to the credentials thing and like go, oh, well, you don't have an MFA, or you haven't published, XYZ number of short stories, or in these particular magazines or whatever. That's not, again, there's nobody in their right mind, nobody that you would ever want to work with, that's going to go, oh, I really loved this idea, but unfortunately this person, doesn't have 10,000 Instagram followers, so I guess the book will never sell, right? So I know sometimes it can feel, especially when you're starting off, right? It's like applying for a job and they go, well, you don't have experience. And it's like, well, how do I get the experience if I need experience to get the experience. And so like, yeah, like how do you show an agent that, you know, that you're bona fide if you don't have the bona fides? And I would say that, you know, it's not going to be that big of a deal, right? If you can get some feathers in your cap along the way, that's great. Obviously it doesn't hurt. But don't ever feel like that you have to go and get an MFA or something before you ever start querying a novel. It just there are too many examples of people succeeding with zero priors, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about my own first query letter. I had a couple of credentials, but certainly like not anything like some of my peers, right? Like I didn't have an MFA. I didn't study undergrad creative writing or anything like that. Basically I had won a like very non-prolific, non-prestigious contest. And so I could put that. But even that contest didn't have much to do with what I was submitting. I would like to think that what happened is I created a query letter that was compelling enough for the agent to then want to read more of the manuscript. And I'll also add that, you know, I talk about like nothing's going to be perfect, don't overthink and all that stuff. Almost every submission, no matter what they ask for, no matter how many pages, it's usually going to involve at least your first page. That is, I would say, maybe the only page to lose sleep over, right? Like you want your query letter to be really good. You also want your first page to be really good. The agent's going to read that first paragraph, those first 2 paragraphs, and you want them to really be hooked. And you can do that a lot of different ways, by the way. A lot of people think that a hook is you have to start with someone being like chased or something, or you have to start with like a really compelling first line that has, you know, that ask like a question or something, or like, or what are some of like kind of the exaggerated examples? Like, I didn't think that this would be the day that I died, or like whatever. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be as simple as just having a strong, clear sense of voice or prose, or some of the things that, you know, we'll talk about in craft classes in the future. But yeah, you just want to make sure that it's a good representation of who you are as a writer, and that you're putting your best foot forward there. Okay.
So James,
Yes,
here's a question just to piggyback off of this, because, you know, I think most debut writers might, like, I like that you called them priors, might not have any priors. But what if I mean, this is essentially your bio that we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if you just put in like either what inspired you to write it or what makes you the best person to write that book? Like that's sort of the substitute that I see a lot of people use, like recommended, I guess.
Absolutely. Listen,
okay.
The things that I'm offering, right, are suggestions, and they're only suggestions, and they're just based on experience and having talked to, you know, people in the profession and all that. There is no one silver bullet catch-all way to do this. So if you're writing your query letter and you get to that, what would be your credentials paragraph, and you really don't have anything there, there's nothing wrong with saying, thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. There's also nothing wrong with sharing a little bit of your heart and why you wrote this manuscript, right? The only time I would say that would hurt is if you're already kind of pushing your length, right? Like if you're already onto that second page and, you know, you've kind of gone on a little long. And again, this is, it's like nails on a chalkboard to hear myself even say this, because I know how hard we all work on our novels. And so to think that somehow we have to kind of censor ourselves a little bit in this query writing process is so tough. But again, I want you to have the best opportunity to succeed. And unfortunately, the reality is a lot of agents, or even a harsher reality, a lot of agents' assistants are just zooming through hundreds of queries. And if they see one that is, you know, 3 pages long, they're going to just be like, no, like I can't even look at this right now. And again, is that unfair? Yes. Is it the best practice for finding the best writers? No. But is it just the reality of what typically happens? Yes, it is. And I don't want anybody like just flying through y'all's submissions. But Abby, that's a great point. If you don't want to just say, thanks for the time and the opportunity, and you want to add a little something that kind of brings it back to like why you wrote this, yeah, absolutely. Because here's something that the agent could then use to help try to sell the book, right? If they're like, okay, I'm going to pitch this to publishers, here's the kind of jacket copy, whatever. It also might be nice to go, and here's the experience the author had that led them to writing the book or something, because all of that plays now, right? Like we're not, it is very much a business. And so we're not just selling the books, we're kind of selling the author too, right? And so if there's something that you think is important or compelling about why you wrote the book or the experience you had that led you to writing the book, then absolutely include that. I would caution away from kind of like, I'm a big fan of William Faulkner, and so I wrote this book because I wanted to write something like William Faulkner or whatever, you know what I mean? Like make sure that it actually is interesting and actually is compelling. But other than that, yeah, I think that's great advice, Abby. I think that would always, kind of get an agent's ears to perk up if they have like kind of that heartfelt, like personalized reason behind why you wrote it.
All right, so here's another one from Amy. Do you recommend querying your favorite agents first or practicing on others to get real life feedback and waiting to query your favorites?
Oh, good question. I just talked to somebody about this yesterday. They were like, I don't want to, I kind of want feedback on the manuscript first before I I can't make a second first impression. So they're like, I kind of want to query, like my mid-tier agents and all this stuff. Listen, again, there's no like super right or wrong answer. My suggestion would be, if you're to the point where you feel comfortable querying at all, like if you think your manuscript is there or there enough, and if you think your query letter is there or there enough, start at the top. Like start with your 10, dream agents or whatever, because you never know, like that it might hit, and you don't, again, just for the sake of efficiency, right? You don't want to like leave those guys till the end, because they might love your stuff and they might want to work with you right away. Now, so much of it's luck and timing, right? But yeah, my advice would be to just start at the top, and put your best foot forward. And if it doesn't work out, just keep kind of working your way down the list. And what's really kind of silly about this whole thing is whoever your dream agent is probably not your dream agent in reality. Like there's probably somebody that's like number 17 or even like 57 on your list that is probably actually a better fit for you than your number one. Because it's so hard to know until you actually have like a working relationship with somebody and experience with somebody as to, how it's all gonna go. But it is a good exercise and a good way of organizing to have that kind of list. And whether you have tiers or whatever, I think what I did is and I owe a lot of this to my wife, because she has that brain more than I do of like the, Excel spreadsheets or whatever. But I think we had like 3 tiers. And it was like, okay, we're going to submit to these 15 agents. And then I think it was then 15 and then maybe 20 or 30 on the next tier. But we submitted to our number one agent first, and that is who we got. And so it just, it doesn't always work that way, but it worked that way for me. And then we got rejections from agents like lower down on our list, right? Like it just that's just kind of how it works. I had an agent and a multi-book deal, and I was still getting rejections 6 months later from agents who were telling me like, your characters are unlikable. Your writing is depressing. Like, look, it's a lot of people are like, oh, I wish that I'd gotten a more personalized rejection. And I'm like, well, I've got some personalized rejections that I wish had been form emails, but yeah. So like, again, that just speaks to the subjectivity of all of it and to the luck and timing of it all, right? Like if my agent or the agents who had, send acceptances, if they had been last, right? If they had waited 6 months or whatever, which I know that sounds crazy, but some agents do. And it's really just baffling and infuriating, but it happens. if they had waited 6 months, then I would have had 6 months worth of these rejections rolling in, and I'm going, oh my God, I'm getting all these rejections, and so, it's just, again, it's out of our control, like once we send it. But yeah, I would suggest sending to your top agents first, but there's no wrong way to do it. If it's going to make you more likely and more comfortable, more likely to actually send out your work and more comfortable doing so, to not send to your top agents first, but like that's what it's going to take to get you to pull that trigger, rip that Band-Aid. Absolutely. Do it that way. Send it to, find the worst agent that you think, like find somebody that you think would be terrible if you want, and send it to them first, if that's what it's going to take to kind of get you to actually do that. Because it's, again, guys, it's hard, man. I'm working with a guy right now who has tons of experience with writing. He's got an MFA. He's got the credential. He's got the priors. And he refuses to send his work out because he just keeps thinking like, oh no, I think I need to kind of redo another draft. And I'm like, dude, you've done so many drafts. Like it's, it's ready. Like just send it. But he's struggling with it. And I get it. Like, I'm not judging him. I'm just saying that's the reality. It's like, this is tough, man. I feel I feel the anxiety and apprehension that a lot of folks have.
Yeah. All right. Here's another one. What is your feeling when the agent requests the full manuscript as part of the query? Okay. Secretly, I love that, but I don't know if it's a good thing.
Yeah, it just depends on the circumstances, right? It could just be that agent has the time right now. Maybe they don't have a huge client roster, or maybe they employ a lot of assistants, whatever. But whatever. Yeah, I mean, I kind of dig that too, right? Why, like, let's just skip that, that kind of middleman step. Sometimes I guess it could mean that like the agent is showing like a little bit of desperation, maybe, but like, is that a bad thing? I don't know, right? It could just mean that they're going to work even harder. I would certainly not let that stop me from submitting to that agent if everything else seems like it's a good fit, right? And also keep in mind that you have the power, as that you are the producer here. You are the one that's producing the art, and so if you have a conversation with an agent and the vibe feels off or whatever, like, you don't have, that's okay. You can say no, but it's always worth kind of hearing them out and hearing what they have to offer. And so yeah, man, if you can get your full manuscript out there just in the query, I don't think that's bad at all. You might even ask, right? Like, hey, like, in a conversation, I wouldn't ask this like in the query, but like, if you send the query, you send the full manuscript, and then they want to have a conversation with you, then that's totally reasonable for you to ask, like, just out of curiosity, why do you ask for the full manuscript? Because they may have a really good reason for it, or it may be a reason that makes you balk a little bit, whatever. I mean, we don't know the circumstances, but no, I would say that's not a red flag up front at all. I would absolutely submit to an agent if you feel good about it.
All right, here's a cool one. BMO is Aaron. What is a reasonable rate that agents will request when signing authors? I always love these like kind of like cool insider number questions because like we don't really know what to expect. So.
Yeah, it's 10 to 15%, and that's it, right? Anything above that that's a red flag, because that's not industry standard, and anybody operating outside of industry standard is not going to be taken seriously by the rest of the industry. Now, there are some agents I've heard of who will like offer lower like percents, if you work with them or whatever. That to me, and again, there's no like, these are your projects, your careers. But to me, that's a huge red flag, right? I want an agent who is offering to take less commission to get me to work with them. I want an agent that is, again, playing by the industry standards and is confident enough in their own ability, that they don't need to kind of do that stuff.
All right, here's another one. Brand new writer here, about 80% done with the first manuscript. Are you referring to legacy publishers, and how does one go about reaching out to an agent?
Yeah. So let's start with the second question first. On the reaching out to the agent part, it's just you can do it a lot of different ways, but the easiest way is you know, go to some of those sites I mentioned earlier, like whether it's Publishers Weekly or Writer's Digest, and they will almost always have like lists of agents or interviews with agents or anything like that. But you can also just Google, like, Google like literary agents or literary agencies or whatever, and just kind of click around and see, you know, who kind of tickles your fancy. And then just about every agent has their own page within their agency, and on that page it will have a link to either their submission form or their submission requirements or whatever, which will often just be through an email. So that's how you reach out to them. We mentioned earlier, like in terms of other ways to find them, or like that might fit, is like books that you feel are similar to what you've written or books that you like. You can look in the acknowledgments, and usually the author will say, "Thanks to my agent, so and so." Or you can just, again, Google that book, Google that author, and you can usually find on the author's website or something like, "I am represented by this person at this agency." But again, those are also things that, like, feel free to reach out to your peers, reach out to me, reach out to Abby. Like, we can kind of send you links and send you things to get you started in the right direction. Are you referring to legacy publishers? Yes and no. I mean, you've got the big publishing houses, but there are a ton of great kind of medium, mid-tier. Then there's some smaller presses. There's some boutique publishers. There are some publishing houses that will allow you to query them without an agent, which, again, that's not a red flag. That just means that they understand sometimes that good writers and good books get overlooked by agents, and they want to give them an opportunity to be published as well. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with, during your query process, if you also want to, while you're trying to find an agent, if you want to then query publishers that don't require an agent, that's fine too. I know Robert Gwaltney, who is a really good author out of Georgia. He had an agent. The agent wasn't having any success selling his book, so Robert queried a publisher on his own and essentially got a publishing deal without the agent. So, it happens in all kinds of different ways. But yeah, there's, to find a home at one of the bigger publishing houses, which is not the end all be all, but which is a lot of people's goal. You do need an agent, just because they are kind of the gatekeepers. Gone are the days where you can like walk in the lobby, in like 1907 and throw a giant stack down and say, "I've got gumption, and take this to your boss. It's going to be a bestseller." So yeah, I mean, that's kind of when I mention like agents trying to sell your manuscript to publishers, I'm usually talking about either like a mid-tier or like one of the big houses.
All right, so here I've been leaning towards self-publishing because it seems so unlikely that an agent will select my manuscript. I'm scared of wasting time and never getting published. How do you weigh these concerns?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I was going to talk about that as well. Like, I would start by saying there's nothing wrong with self-publishing. If that's the route you choose to go, like that's great. In fact, it's as great now as it's ever been. My advice would be that to query first and give yourself whatever timeline you're comfortable with. Even if it's a short timeline, even if it's only like, I'm going to send 10 queries, and I'm going to wait 2 months, right? Now, that does lower your chance of getting an acceptance because it is a numbers game. So like if you send 50 queries, then you get, and if you send 50 queries and wait 6 months, there's more of a chance that you'll get an agent than if you, lower those numbers. But yeah, set whatever timeline you're comfortable with and just see if you can get an agent. And if you can't, cool. Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely self-publish, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are great ways to get your book out there to where it's read. Great ways if you're looking, some people are looking to make money, some people aren't. Some people just want to have the book, but there's great ways to make money if that's what you're wanting to do. And so, my advice would be to try the agent first. The only reason I say that is because, and again, this is very dependent on your own personal goals. But if you get an agent and if you get a traditional publisher, there are going to be some things that are open to you that are not open to self-published authors. Things such as awards, festivals, conferences, spots on panels, like grants and fellowships, funding, and then also just the connections that publishing houses have in the world of marketing. You know what I mean? And again, it's all very dependent on your personal goals, but there are, like, I can do all the self-marketing I want and often have to, because that's just kind of the reality of the industry right now. But my publisher also has, relationships with people that I would never be able to get to, right? Oprah is not taking my call anytime soon. And so yeah, but I would just say, don't sell yourself short, and like, just take a shot at it. And then if it doesn't work out, like, cool, you already kind of have the right attitude, which is like, I don't know, like maybe this book is not for agents. Maybe it's going to be self-published, and there is zero wrong with that.
So I've got a couple credential questions here, and I kind of want to lump them together a little, but I think I can only put one on the screen at a time. So I'm going to start here. Can an award in your credentials be too old? So I know we've kind of covered that second question, but what about the award being too old? Is that such a thing?
No, not at all. If you have a writing award, too old meaning there's no like statute of limitations. Now, if you won a writing award in like kindergarten or something, like, then that's obviously that's not obviously applicable. But no, like if you have a credential that is not super recent, like, that's okay. That doesn't matter. What matters is that at some point someone said, thought enough of your writing to XYZ, right? Like, to either give you this award, or to give you this degree, or to publish your story, whatever it was, somebody else, thought enough of your writing to do that. So no statute.
So then B's got the question about like having stories that people like to read online, an archive of our own. I'm guessing is that, I don't know that one, but I don't know, maybe like Wattpad, someplace where you share stories, you can get followers. That would count as a credential, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you have, I guess it kind of depends. Like, if you have, like, whether it's a Substack or whatever it is, if you have something and you have readers or followers or whatever the terminology is for that site, then yeah, you can absolutely put that. If you have two, you might want to think like, okay, does this necessarily represent what I want to, convey, right? Like, but what you could do though, actually, if you want to turn it into kind of what Abby was talking about, right? Hey, I write stories on this platform, and this is what led to my love of writing, that led to me writing this book, or whatever, that might make more sense if you don't like actually have a number of readers or viewers or followers that like is impressive. If that makes sense.
So Ginger wants to know, how are self-published credentials interpreted in a traditional publisher's inquiry? And this is interesting. Yeah.
This is a really great question. Unfortunately, it varies. I think at one point there was this kind of stigma around self-publishing to where it was like not a good thing if you had self-published before. That is completely gone, right? So now there are some agents who I would say the majority of agents that I've talked to or that I know have like no opinion, meaning like if you've self-published before, that's great. Like they're not gonna hold that against you, but they're also not gonna like elevate you because of that. They're just gonna be more interested in your query your query letter and like what your current book is about. But there are now agents who get excited when you've self-published because it goes, oh, well, great. Like they've already, so let's say that you've self-published and you're submitting a new book that hasn't been previously published. They're going, well, cool. At least I know that this person like is serious about writing. has sustained stamina, right? Like they've written at least 2 books now. And then there are also folks who query agents with using self-published books, and the agents are like, "Oh, we love that. We love that because we literally can see kind of like, you know, what it would look like basically. Like we have the not only do we have the whole manuscript laid out for us, but like we have like a cover, and like that helps us with tone or vibe. No, you might not have the same cover like if you then get an agent and then get a publishing deal for that book. But yeah, it's I would say that the thoughts and feelings have changed a lot around that. So no more does it hurt you, but sometimes it even helps you.
So as someone currently querying, I can say that the query managers, I have filled out several recently that will ask, have you ever self-published a book? And if so, they do want to know how many copies you've sold.
Oh, that's a great point. Yes. If you have self-published before and you have the data of copies that you sold, and it's like kind of good, it doesn't have to be great, but if it's just kind of good, like absolutely put that. Now, if they ask how many copies you've sold and you have the data, and it's because if you don't have the data, you don't have the data. But if you have the data and it's not that great, maybe you tell them you don't have the data, right? Maybe you just go, I self-published this book. I haven't kept up with, how often it's sold or whatever. But it's again, like we're getting at that point, you're getting so into the weeds that you then start to wonder, like, does the agent actually even care about the book that I'm writing, right? Which is one thing that I'll add when you're having conversations with agents post query, right? Like if they want to talk to you about literary representation, it's always a good idea to ask them what they liked about your book. Because not only will that give you some insight into kind of like, where their heads at in terms of you as a client, but also just like it to make sure they've read it, kind of to make sure they understood it. Because again, like there are agents out there who you won't see any red flags or hear anything bad about them, but they're kind of in the business of collecting clients. Like if it's a number game for us, right? If we send out 100 queries, that's more likely that we're going to get an acceptance. Some agents want to play that numbers game too. And if they take on 100 clients, then it's more likely they're going to have one that, gets a book deal. And again, it's up to you. So I'm not saying that like you can't go with an agent who operates that way. But just know that agent is likely not going to be looking at you and your project as a person and as a project. It's just going to be a number. And again, that's okay. Some people are like, dude, make me a number, whatever. I don't care. But just be wary of that.
All right. So Annie says, what rights are you usually left with? Which ones should you fight to keep? And are you following where she's going with the question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. So this will be usually more of a question once you have like a contract offer from a publisher, right? Because when you agree to work with an agent, it can be as simple as like an email that says, I give you the permission to shop this book or whatever, right? Some agents require you to like sign like a big contract or whatever, but whether it's an email or a contract with an agent, like you're not giving them the right to anything other than to try to sell the book. And you can rescind that right like that. You're not like legally bound to anything. But once the agent then has an offer on the table for your manuscript from a publisher, then it becomes just kind of some industry standard stuff versus kind of how you and your agent feel about it. So for example, there are going to be some rights that obviously the publisher is going to have. They're going to have the right to print, all the first printing. They're going to have American rights. Some publishers will ask for international rights, at which point you and your agent will have to decide, like, do we want to sell them those international rights for a little more money up front, or your agent might say, I have a really great relationship with publishers overseas, and, we want to keep these rights, and I can make a better deal than your publisher can, whatever. And some agents are also very candid and go, no, I think your publisher might have a better shot than me at selling these rights. So let's sell them and get some money now, and, all that. But this is all stuff that like will come up in conversation with your agent as you go through the contract. So there'll be film and TV rights or another one, and that'll depend largely on who your agent or agency is. My agency's Trident Media. They kind of hang their hat on being like really good at film and TV rights. So when my publisher asked for film and TV rights, Trident said, no, that's a non-starter, right? There will be audio rights, which again, that's at this point in the industry, that's usually pretty standard that'll go to your publisher. And these are all rights that are like little amounts of money that stack up in your contract, right? So like when a publisher says, we'll give you X amount of money for this book, what they're really saying is we'll give you these 10 different X's amounts of money for all these different rights to this book. And so if you and your agent want to, like take some of those rights and retain them, okay, but you're probably going to get a little less money up front, which again, it's fine. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And that's when you just kind of lean on the expertise and experience of your agent.
Yeah. So I think we've worked our way through all of the questions. And unless anybody throws a Hail Mary at us here at the end, I think we've done it. Now we all know everything we need to know about agents and querying, and we're all ready to jump out. And if you're not, shameless plug, next Friday, I'm doing a deep dive on agents where I show you what these websites all look like, agents' websites, query tracker, manuscript wish list. I'll go into all of those, and I'll show you some that are good fits, some that are not good fits for me, so you can kind of see my thought process if you're trying to break down what do you do with all this information once you collect it. Because I mean, it's a rabbit hole, but it's also really good market research. So and I keep saying this, I've really harped on this the last couple of weeks. Even if you think you want to indie publish your book, I still suggest that you write a query letter. I still suggest that you research agents, because it's all about how are books bought and sold? How do we talk about those books? What is selling? How do you talk about your own book? And all of those are really good things to have, things to be able to just be aware of and to be able to do. So anyway, James, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking, no more questions. Everybody's just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. B took a ton of notes. So anyway, I appreciate everybody who showed up today. I appreciate you, James Wade. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to end the live stream right now, but you hang on tight right there. Everybody, we will see you in the DabbleU community. Bye, everybody.